The topic for today is empty force. Uh, Years ago, in the 70s, my partner at the time in Kung Fu and karate and all kinds of stuff we'd studied since high school, Martin N., we imported a teacher from the Orient that he had discovered there, and he thought knew a lot of stuff, and it turned out he really did, from whom we learned Sancho and all kinds of important things about Taijiquan. We were completely satisfied with his instruction and so forth, and this went on for a while, a couple of years and so forth, until one day he invited us into this room, and he said he had a real important thing to discuss with us. Very important. Okay. He said that it's all great that we had brought him there, but there was a much more important person that he had never told us about in China. Then we should turn our efforts towards immigrating this real important person now. And this person was important because he understood the highest refinement of Taijiquan, the highest achievement, kind of secret thing that only like Mr. Jew and a few other important adepts were capable of understanding, etc. And this was empty force. He could project his chi, his force, and he could knock people down or even kill them. And we should get to work right away and bring this guy over to America so that we could start learning this important thing. Well, Marty and I we kind of looked at each other and wow, we didn't quite expect to be taken in right away into the highest level of, Kung Fu fantasy immediately, but okay. And so after a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds of this, Mr. Jew looked at us really carefully and he said, "Well, you believe me, don't you?" We looked at each other again and said, "Well, of course, Master, we believe you totally, don't worry about that." And he kind of looked around a little bit and finally looked up and he said in a very serious voice, "Then you are fools." He said, "No one can do this, and do not believe anyone who tells you that they can." Now, we could just end this little talk right there because in some sort of complete way, that's the final word on the subject. And I could, go on and on about the various examples of this kind of stuff. Some really funny ones, like one guy who mentioned that, he could do this, but only with his wife. In fact, the usual thing on empty force that you were told is that if this doesn't work on you, if you say, "Well, look, if this really works, then try it on me." If it doesn't work on you, then it's really too bad. You're not developed highly enough to do it. In other words, you don't have enough chi for this to work on you. And with you, he would just have to hit you with his fists or whatever, But if you were like a great master like himself or something, then, this empty force would have an effect on you. So this is pretty foolproof, right? This is kind of the emperor's new clothes defense, So it's very easy to find people who are quick to show that they really have this much chi. And, so when you do various things, they react. And then master says, "Wow, that's very good. You're a very good student." So what's interesting about this kind of thing is that it always has some sort of reference to something real. It's never what it appears to be, but that doesn't mean that it's completely disregardable. And empty force is something like this. It's absolutely not what it pretends to be or what it, people assume it to be. But it is a kind of very extreme example of something that's useful to know about Taijiquan in terms of its methodology and what it does. And so if you'll bear with me for a minute, we'll go back to the whole basic learning method of Taijiquan, which is called learning through loss. Well, think about it. You hardly ever learn anything except through loss. I mean, it's the only way you find out you're doing anything wrong. So actually, it's not such radical a concept. It sounds very strange to boxers, like we don't want to lose, so don't tell me we're going to learn by losing, But of course, again, that's the only way you ever learn anything. But the point is, Taijiquan actually is filled with protocols and exercises and so forth, which appear to be, when they're two-person exercises, they appear to be an expression of something on the part of someone who is developing some sort of technique or force or, strike or something like that. And actually what it's really testing is the skill of the victim. So this shows up at the very, very first exercise you're given, which is to yield. I'm going to touch you here and you're going to yield. Well, obviously, if you don't yield, this is, again, the emperor's new clothes, except in this case, it should be understood that it has a meaning. It's saying like, the reason this isn't working is not because I'm not strong enough to push you, but because you're misunderstanding the exercise. The exercise is, if I put a feather's weight on you, you're supposed to yield. So in other words, you're supposed to lose. You're supposed to demonstrate the skill that you're learning by a form of losing. Okay. And this, I won't go through all the progressions, but all the levels of Taiji teaching and learning, all the exercises, all the protocols, and so forth, involve some sort of version of this. For instance, when you get into using the techniques and learning what they call the postures, which is all the different martial techniques, your whole skill, what you're trying to learn, is not how to make one of these techniques overpower someone so that they can't resist it. Now, this is kind of the assumption in most martial arts. I studied other martial arts for a long time, 10 years before I studied Taiji, and I'm pretty sure that this is the unspoken assumption in anything that you learn, which is that when you apply it, if it doesn't work, it means you didn't apply it quite well enough. You should have been stronger, you should have been faster, So in any case, that's what you're expected to try to do, which is to make it work. With Taiji, all of the exercises are designed really to do what you should do when it doesn't work. It's all based around change. Change is given a lot of lip service by a lot of martial artists. Like, wow, it's like really important. But most of them actually don't have any device for changing. All of their learning and all their teaching is about, how to not have to change, how to win. And winning means you didn't have to change. Whatever you did worked, and it was fine. When teaching some of the Sancho techniques in Russia, I continually ran up against people who told me, hey, you can't make that work on me. And I'll say, well, okay, let me try. And of course, they would stop me, and I would change to something else, which might have been much more advantageous. But they would immediately stop and say, see, you had to change. It didn't work. And I had to explain, this is what I'm teaching you. I'm teaching you how to do things, when things don't work, how to change. So, in all the different cases, all the different techniques, for instance, we have a number of instances of single whip in the form. And they have different exits. That means, what happens when single whip doesn't work? What happens when it's neutralized? What happens when it's countered? What happens when then you have a change to another thing. And all the teaching of Taijiquan is about this. The kind of ultimate lesson of this is when you come to the practice of discharge. Now you got to realize, discharge looks just as phony to people as empty force. And the fact is, it should, considering what the expectation they bring to the practice that they're observing. In other words, when they see two guys and one guy pushes the other guy and the other guy flies off through the air in a certain way, they think he's being demonstrated his enormous power of doing this. And of course, it's natural to say, well, try that on me. You can't make that work on me. Well, of course he can't make it work on you. In fact, as Mr. Chu was quick to tell us, you can't make that work on your grandma. You can't make that work on a drunk on the street. You can't make that work on a whole lot of people because having it work is a skill by the person that it's being done to. In other words, the victim is the one who is showing the skill. Now, it's very important to learn. Let's just imagine what is happening here. You're receiving the opponent's force. You're making it go all the way down to your feet and come back. So, it is coming back through you, and it is making you jump. In fact, Mr. Jew used to say, discharge means make him jump. Well, you can't, and as Zheng Ching said once, even the greatest master cannot discharge a statue. The whole presumption is that the person is doing something himself, which then you are forcing to become something that we call a discharge. Now, it just so happens, and this is a topic for another day, but it just so happens that when you develop this and it becomes completely balanced perfectly, and you reflect this absolutely perfectly, there's a chance you can receive and discharge the other person, the person who was trying to discharge you. But again, this is only going to happen if both of you are highly skilled at being discharged. Being discharged is the skill. It can result in something else, but like all the other skills in Taijiquan, it is essentially the victim's skill. Now, the more skillful you are, by the way, why do we practice this? Why do we want to become skillful at being discharged? Well, first of all, you got to understand with discharge, there's a kind of traditional concept of discharge in which somebody becomes very disadvantageous after being discharged. But in this case, he's double weighted. So we're not going into that right now. There's also a proper discharge. In other words, it's just an extension of extremely lively legs. And so when your legs become extremely lively, this means you are very good at footwork. And you have to really pass through the stage of learning in Taijiquan in which you are very good at footwork before you start practicing discharge, because discharge is just a matter of you becoming more and more lively, more and more energetic, and more expert at your reception of the other person's force. Now, the better you are at this, the lighter it takes to discharge you. That is to say, the lighter it takes to make your legs activate and you become something. So the skill of a Taiji boxer is not based on how much force it takes him to make him move his feet, but how little force it takes to make him move his feet. And if he can react at the lightest touch, then he is really the most skillful. Now, this doesn't mean that he doesn't want to somehow try to draw this in and completely store it. So he's not just letting people push him over like a feather, but he is cultivating a certain skill. Now, you might say empty force is just a kind of fantasy of that skill becoming going to the eyes. And Zheng Ching said, if the skill of yielding does not eventually go to the eyes, then if that didn't happen, Taijiquan would not be a martial art. But it does. And so finally, you can react to whatever another person does in some sort of, intelligent way. But this is empty force. When you start to cross the street and there's a cop in the middle of the street, and just as you start, he puts up his hand like this and you stop. Do you credit this guy with some kind of incredible power in his hand that he actually stopped you? No. You stopped because you understood what he was saying. This is empty force. Any kind of idea that this is demonstrating anything except sensitivity on the part of the person receiving it, it's crazy. But again, that almost excuses this excuse that they make where they say, if I can't do this to you, you don't have enough chi, you don't have enough skill. Yeah, in a sense where they're right. You don't have the skill that it takes to interpret what they do. But the problem is they leave you with the impression that they are actually doing something that has some force behind it, and it does not. So please, if you don't remember anything else from this little talk, remember this. No one can do this, and don't believe anyone who says that they can.